Manna and Quail, divine provision in the wilderness. In the vast and unforgiving wilderness of the Sinai Peninsula, the Israelites found themselves in the throes of hardship and uncertainty. They had been set free from the shackles of Egyptian slavery but were now faced with the daunting challenge of survival in the barren desert. It was in this arid landscape that God's divine provision would manifest in the form of manna and quail, sustaining His chosen people during their wilderness journey. The desert stretched endlessly before the Israelites, a harsh and unforgiving landscape. The scorching sun beat down on them as they trudged wearily through the shifting sands. Faces etched with fatigue and concern, they were a multitude who had tasted the sweetness of freedom but now faced the bitterness of hunger and thirst. Days turned into weeks, and the relentless conditions took their toll. The Israelites' clothing was threadbare, their lips parched, and their stomachs hollow. As they huddled in makeshift tents during the cold desert nights, the lamentations grew louder. They cried out in hunger, their voices echoing through the vast emptiness of the wilderness. Moses and Aaron, the chosen leaders of this wandering multitude, found themselves in the unenviable position of trying to console and guide their people. The complaints against them and against God grew louder with each passing day. The Israelites yearned for the familiar comforts of Egypt, even as they remembered the harshness of their bondage. Yet, amid this sea of despair and doubt, two constants remained. By day, a towering pillar of cloud rose into the sky, leading the Israelites on their journey. By night, a pillar of fire cast a warm and comforting glow over the camp, protecting them from the darkness of the desert. These divine manifestations served as a continual reminder of God's presence and guidance. One morning, as the first rays of sunlight pierced the horizon, the Israelites awoke to a miraculous sight. The ground around their tents was covered in a fine, flaky substance, glistening like dewdrops in the desert's early light. It was a divine bread, the bread from heaven itself. This was manna, a gift from God, promised as a response to the people's cries for sustenance. The Israelites emerged from their tents, their eyes wide with wonder, as they gazed upon this unexpected bounty. They scooped up the manna in their hands, feeling its fine texture and tasting its sweet flavor. It was a taste like no other, a taste of divine provision. With each mouthful, their strength was renewed, their hunger abated, and their spirits lifted. Families began to work together, children helping their elders, as they collected the manna. Baskets were woven from palm fronds, and containers fashioned from whatever materials could be found. It became a communal effort, a shared responsibility, and a testament to the bonds that were forming among the people. Moses, guided by God's instructions, spoke to the Israelites about the manna. It was to be collected each morning, just enough for their daily needs. Any excess would spoil by the next day, except on the sixth day, when they were to gather twice as much to prepare for the Sabbath, a day of rest and reflection. The manna became a daily miracle, a reminder of God's faithfulness and the covenant between Him and His people. The Israelites learned to trust in God's provision, and each morning, the manna was there, covering the ground like a blanket of grace. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, another miracle occurred. With the setting of the sun on a cool desert evening, a vast flock of quail descended upon the camp. Their numbers were beyond imagination, and they settled among the Israelites, providing a readily available source of meat. The Israelites were overjoyed at the sight of the quail, and their hunger was further satisfied. They feasted on quail, their gratitude palpable, their spirits lifted. It was as if God had opened the storehouses of heaven to provide for His people in the wilderness. Moses instructed the Israelites regarding the quail as well. This was a provision from God, and they were to gather enough to satisfy their needs but not to excess. It was a lesson in moderation and gratitude. The Sabbath, a sacred day of rest, presented a unique challenge. God's provision of manna and quail continued, but on the seventh day, the Sabbath, no manna fell. Moses had instructed the people to gather twice as much on the sixth day, and miraculously, the manna from the previous day remained fresh. It was a sign of God's sanctification of the Sabbath, a day to honor and rest in His presence. Throughout this period in the wilderness, gratitude and faith blossomed among the Israelites. They witnessed daily miracles of provision and learned to trust in God's guidance and care. The manna and quail became symbols of His unwavering faithfulness. In conclusion, the story of manna and quail served as a profound reminder that even in the harshest of circumstances, God's abundant blessings could nourish both body and soul. This period in the wilderness became a time of deep faith, forging a bond between the Israelites and their Creator as they journeyed toward the Promised Land.